This is your Enhancement Talent Review for WWE Extreme Rules 2019. Hope everyone is doing well after that horrendous ending to this show, unless you're a Brock Lesnar fan, which are probably few and far between at this point, but to give it away in the title and in the beginning of this, Brock Lesnar did indeed cash in his Money in the Bank contract and did indeed become, once again, for the third time, the WWE Universal Champion. And it just seems so odd, because this is the first time I can think of with the Money in the Bank concept where we were repeatedly told, we were batted over the head being told that at Extreme Rules, Brock Lesnar would be cashing in. That told to us by Paul Heyman, who told us it's not a prediction, it's a spoiler. And even though we had been repeatedly told that as of Monday on Raw and on this show earlier in the night, it still came as a surprise. It's just, I guess everybody just expected Heyman to be bluffing. And that's part of the funny thing about it. It was like a double reverse psychology thing, because Heyman hyped this up as any time that he has used that catchphrase, it's not a prediction, it's a spoiler. Every time he has used that catchphrase, he has delivered on that promise. But then he would follow that up by saying, so if I was going to lie and just try to get in the champions' heads, I've built up enough credibility to do so. And he did essentially that same thing on this show. And so the double reverse psychology is that he wanted us to think that it could happen, but then it couldn't happen, but then it couldn't happen because it could happen. So there you go. That's something to wrap your brain around. Before we got that cash in, I thought this was a fairly decent pay-per-view, albeit way too long for my liking. Technically, we ended up with 13 total matches. There were 10, I believe, as of Thursday, when we did our predictions video. And this I guess in total it went 5 hours, including the pre-show. Just a bit too long for me. I wish they would try to figure out a way to just, I'm okay with the SummerSlams, the Survivor Series, the Royal Rumble, and the WrestleMania, those being long pay-per-views, but I wish that with there being a pay-per-view every month, we could get it down to a 3-hour-ish area. But other than that, and obviously the ending, which I'll go into in detail in the end when we get to the main event, I did think that this was not a bad show. There were points where I thought that it dragged, but for the most part, there were good matches throughout the show, and everybody, for the most part, everybody worked hard, and everybody got. I mean, it was tough because you could tell the crowd was dragging through the middle of the show too, but they were into it at points, and just a decent B-level show is what I would call it, until the end. Then everything got turned upside down in a shocking turn of events. But we'll do things in order with the pre-show, which featured Shinsuke Nakamura challenging Finn Balor for the Intercontinental title. And this match is on the pre-show for the Intercontinental title. It was not even announced until today, I think. And so this was set up by Nakamura getting the win over Balor on Tuesday on SmackDown. And this is something that just boggles my mind a bit. It's just Finn Balor has not been featured on TV in like the last month or so until this Tuesday. And in that time, he lost to Nakamura, and now he lost to Nakamura again. And you go back to Finn when he won the title from Lashley at WrestleMania. I mean, there's just been nothing to it. There was the open challenge. He did the match with Sami Zayn on Raw that night after, I believe. And other than that, I can't really recall much of anything Balor did. He did the stuff with Andrade, which was dropped because of reasons beyond their control, it seemed like. But just from going from that and then just doing absolutely nothing, barely being on TV, and then dropping the title to Nakamura here, who picks up a clean win on this pre-show. What a 180 for Nakamura, huh? Like, I feel like we hadn't seen this dude in at least like 3 months until Tuesday. And in 6 days' time, he gets a win over the champion. He gets a match with the champion for the title, and he beats him. And he becomes the new Intercontinental Champion. So, a real 180 there for Nakamura. If you remember, Nakamura was the United States Champion, and he had a long reign with the title, but the only problem was that he never defended it. Because at that point, SmackDown's mid-card division was... it didn't exist. There was no one there at that point, it seemed like. It's just... and hopefully it's different this time around. I'm not going to hold my breath on there being anything different, being that Balor just had a similar non-eventful title reign, and you can chalk up the lack of TV time probably to the wild card rule and Shane McMahon taking up all of SmackDown. So there's that, but hopefully that will be coming to an end soon, and hopefully Nakamura can I like Nakamura, and I would like him to have a good run with the belt. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad move, because as I covered on the SmackDown review this week, I thought it was good for Nakamura that he came back and got the win over Balor, because the time away made you forget that he wasn't doing much before that. So that sort of plays to his advantage. And now the first thing we've seen from him since being away for those months is beating the champion twice and becoming the new Intercontinental Champion. So you can build some momentum out of that for Nakamura if you do it right. And I'm sure there will be a rematch between Balor and Nakamura, even though the rematch clause was antiquated so long ago. I'm sure there will be an exception, quote unquote. Drew Gulak retained against Tony Nese for the Cruiserweight title. I didn't think this was anything special. I actually think this was probably one of the more lackluster Cruiserweight matches on recent times in the pay-per-view matches. And it's well noted, no one keeps up with 205 Live, and that includes me. I don't really keep up with it. I see what they put on the pay-per-views every month, and that's about it. But even just with that limited exposure, just about every time the Cruiserweight match on the pay-per-view, I feel like it delivers for the most part. And this one, it wasn't bad. I don't want to say that. Like, it was fine, but it just didn't feel as it didn't have the same high-flying element with Gulak and Nese not being as much of high flyers as the other guys that are normally in these matches. But it just didn't do it for me, really. But Gulak retains in his hometown of Philadelphia, I believe it was. So a hometown person getting a win. We start the main show. The opener of this show was Undertaker and Roman Reigns now named the Graveyard Dogs versus Drew McIntyre and Shane McMahon. Shane-O McIntyre, as I'm starting to hear them referred to as. So it was different that this started the show. I figured this would either be, well, I didn't figure it would be the main event, but I figured it would probably be the match before the main event. But instead, it starts the show and took up a big chunk of this show, too, because even though the match itself was only 17 minutes, by the time this was over, it was 7:40. And that's 40 minutes into the show. So that was strange that, well, you take 5 minutes for Undertaker's entrance, however long the video package was that they played beforehand, and it adds up. So going into this, early on, Elias, of course, comes out and interferes. Surprisingly, he was the only one that came out and interfered. There was no Kevin Owens. There was no Miz or the other 10 million people that Shane McMahon is involved with in a storyline. There was no revival or anything. Elias interferes when Taker was about to put Shane through the announce table. Elias comes in with a guitar shot to Taker's back. They end up putting Undertaker on the announce table for Shane to jump off with the leap of faith from the turnbuckle to the announce table, taking out Undertaker with an elbow. They then do a trash can coast-to-coast spot with Shane taking out Undertaker. He drags Taker to the center of the ring for a pin. Undertaker does his sit-up, no-sells everything. He and Roman have their comeback, and the money shot for this was as Taker is taking down Shane, and he's setting up for the tombstone. He's doing the throat slash and the rolling the eyes to the back of the head, and you just see in the shot Drew McIntyre comes in, and the shot of Drew just stalking Undertaker while he's doing that pose was awesome. And Taker turns around, surely to be met by a Claymore kick, but instead he was intercepted by Roman Reigns, who spears Drew McIntyre. Shane gets tombstoned, and Undertaker pins Shane McMahon. It was pretty much what I expected. I figured that Drew was going to be the one eating the pin here, so I was actually happy that Shane ended up losing in this match. That was nice. I guess the plan after this is still to do Shane versus Owens, which I'm glad that they didn't go with the logic that they have to keep Shane strong so that Owens can beat him and pin Drew instead, because that's definitely what I thought they were going to do. But either way, I mean, this was the right use of The Undertaker. Coming off of the last appearance he had at the Super Showdown show, this was leaps and bounds a better showing for The Undertaker. And when you get him in there with guys that can carry the weight in a tag match with Roman and Drew, and just use him in that way and let him do his stuff and just be able to mask it more, that's more beneficial to him to not have to work a whole 20-minute match by himself at the age and condition he's in. So that's a good use of The Undertaker. I enjoyed it. I thought he looked great. I thought this match was delivered on its purpose. And I don't know if the rumor of a possible Undertaker and Drew McIntyre match is in the future, but if it is, Drew McIntyre could certainly use a big win over someone like The Undertaker to get rid of the stench of his past of just being the lackey to the bigger stars like Shane McMahon and Dolph Ziggler, as that is his current reputation. So if Drew were able to go on his own and beat Undertaker at SummerSlam, that would be a big catapulting win for McIntyre. So we'll see if that's the direction they go in. Either way, if this was the last, I mean, I can't imagine that after Undertaker not being at WrestleMania, that they would bring him in for Super Showdown, they would bring him in for Extreme Rules, but then they would not bring him in for SummerSlam. It just seems like that wouldn't make much sense, being that SummerSlam is the big show. So I would expect him to do something, and it seems like it might be a singles match with Drew. We'll see. We have the Revival versus the Usos. This was a fine tag team match. I didn't note much on it, but the Revival end up retaining. I feel like a lot of people expected the Usos to win with the Revival's contract speculations, but I picked the Revival to win. I think that there's time for them to drop them when they need to. So I picked the Revival to win here. Aleister Black versus Cesaro. This was one of my favorite matches of the night. Maybe looking back, it was my favorite match of the night, even though it was probably the shortest, unless you count, well, except the Dolph and Owens match and the cash-in. This probably would have been the shortest. And either that or the Bayley match. But this was exactly what it needed to be. Cesaro was the perfect man for WWE to pick to get Aleister Black's momentum going after doing these weeks on end promos of Aleister Black begging someone to pick a fight with him. We finally got what Aleister Black wanted, and he finally went against Cesaro, and it was the perfect person to build up Black, and this was a perfect pairing of Black and Cesaro. The spot of the night really was came from this match where Aleister Black comes off the top rope looking for the knees to the face of Cesaro, the Meteora. Cesaro catches him in midair and somehow catapults him up into the air from that position and catches him with the European uppercut on the way down. Cesaro is awesome, and he always has been. And it's a shame that this is the role for him right now, but he's excelling in it by helping someone like Aleister Black get over. And the finish comes with a Black Mass out of nowhere for the win. Hopefully they keep building Black up after this. If it comes to Tuesday night and they do another one of those dark room promos with Aleister Black begging someone else to pick a fight with him, then I will truly lose all hope. So hopefully they have something else in mind. We had the Nikki Cross and Alexa Bliss versus Bayley 2-on-1 handicap match for the SmackDown Women's title. Even though Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross are both Raw superstars, but we'll ignore that. And we'll also ignore that this is a 2-on-1 handicap match for a singles title. And it's funny, like it's the Extreme Rules show. There were, I think, 3 matches altogether that actually had stipulations, which was the Last Man Standing match, and then a No Holds Barred match, and then an Extreme Rules match, which are basically the same thing. But I guess a handicap match counts as a stipulation in their eyes. I don't know. This was dreadfully boring to me. There was nothing terrible about it. I just wasn't invested in this storyline or this match at all. And I think that just comes with the build to it that's told Nikki and Alexa pairing that abandons Nikki Cross's character and everything that I've talked about before that I don't like about this whole program. But Bayley ends up retaining with an elbow off the top to Nikki Cross. There was no split afterwards. There was Alexa didn't walk out. She consoled Nikki after the loss. There was no attack or anything like that, and there was no Sasha Banks either. But yeah, I really hope that they just set up someone else for Bayley. Like, I mean, Ember Moon is currently in a storyline with Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville that I think was about them breaking her Nintendo Switch and something about donuts and some other nonsense. You have Ember Moon there, who is an incredible performer, as you can see in her matches in NXT with Asuka. And Asuka is another one you have there in a tag team in a non-existent tag team division. So there's plenty of opportunity. Obviously, the best opportunity, and probably what Bayley needs the most, would be a Sasha Banks return, a heel turn, and then a program with her. But we don't know what direction that will go in. And I actually think Becky Lynch would need a program with a heel Sasha even more than Bayley does. We had Braun Strowman and Bobby Lashley in a last man standing match. I was struggling to stay awake during this match. And I'm not sure if that was because of the match itself or just because of how tired I was. But either way, I had to get up and get some caffeine in me. So I thought for the most part this was, I mean, really there was fun stuff in the match. I wouldn't really call it a fun match, but it had elements that I liked, but that wasn't enough to make the whole match enjoyable. Let's see, how long did this match go? 17 minutes, and there was probably a few minutes of good stuff of Bobby Lashley spearing Strowman through the barricade was a cool spot because it wasn't just like he speared him through it, he picked him up and ran him into it and through it, which was cool. They went through the concourse area, lots of stuff in the crowd, and I'm struggling for the life of me to describe the finish because I have no idea what exactly it was. But while they're in the crowd, Strowman power slams Lashley off of the stand that they're on, and he power slams him into something. I mean, if you want to be technical, I'm sure it was just a crash pad, but I'm not sure what exactly it was supposed to be. So they do that power slam, and then Braun, as the ref is counting, he can't even see these guys because they've disappeared into this abyss that is below them. But Braun breaks through it, and the ref counts out Lashley, and Braun picks up the win. I actually picked a draw going into this match. Like, I could have seen them doing like that same sort of spot, but then just both of them staying down. But it's clear they want to get some steam back behind Braun Strowman, and that's a rebuilding project at this point. But props for trying, I guess. I mean, they at least made this storyline interesting going into the match, which is more than I can say for their last match at Super Showdown. But the whole thing with the stage, the LED board explosion that they did, and making Lashley look as strong as they possibly could going into this match for Strowman to take him out. I can't say it was poorly booked. I think it was a well-booked end. I hope it's the end. I mean, I don't imagine there's anything else you can get from this. Unless they want to do more tug-of-wars and arm wrestling contests. But, I mean, it was what it should have been. So I can't really complain about it too much. We had the triple threat tag team match for the SmackDown tag team titles, featuring Daniel Bryan and Eric Rowan against Otis and Tucker of Heavy Machinery and Big E and Xavier Woods of the New Day. Of course, it's a pay-per-view, and Big E had to do his obligatory spear through the ropes. It still is just a scary move to look at, but nonetheless, Otis teased doing a dive, which the mental image of Otis just diving over the top rope and doing a tope is something that I now perhaps morbidly want to see. But he teases doing the dive, but before he gets to the ropes, he instead just goes through the ropes and onto the apron and just jumps on top of everyone to take everyone out. Later on, Bryan gets the blind tag on Otis during a Tower of Doom spot. Bryan hides on the outside, and Big E hits Otis with a superplex, only for Bryan to immediately come off the top rope with a diving headbutt onto Big E. It's not often we see Bryan do the diving headbutt, so I guess at least they're not doing it often with Bryan, but I still don't really like seeing, especially Bryan, do that move. But Bryan hits the diving headbutt. He puts Big E in the label lock, and it's a really good. I guess it's not a near fall because it's a submission, but this was a really good false finish sequence because Big E struggles and he manages to get to the ropes, and Bryan has the cool counter, like when someone's reaching to get to the ropes, that he changes the submission and just puts both of their arms behind their back, and that's a nice spot. But Big E manages to get to the ropes, even though the ropes don't break the submission. So Big E basically crawls all the way out into the apron until Bryan releases the hold. Bryan goes for the yes kicks on Big E. He no-sells them and gets up in Bryan's face. Bryan slaps Big E like twice until Big E gets him up and tags in Woods. They hit the midnight hour and win the match. They pin Daniel Bryan too. Being that it was a triple threat match, they didn't have to, but they did pin Bryan, and I am fine with that because Bryan's work since going into WrestleMania and the feud with Kofi Kingston, Bryan's work as a heel has just been phenomenal. It's been on another level because I even talked about it on the SmackDown review, is that he does such a good job of even in his promos, putting his opponent over, but then also making it fit his heel agenda, like that the New Day are great athletes, but they don't take anything seriously, and that whole promo. And going into WrestleMania, they did the B+ player stuff with Kofi, and I think Bryan, like everyone in the New Day, I think owes Bryan for helping make their moments all the better, because Kofi winning at WrestleMania obviously was a big moment, and it would have been a big moment no matter who it was against, but Bryan's heel work was able to elevate it that much more. And in this case, the New Day winning their sixth tag team titles, I believe, I don't believe this really would have been that big a moment had it not been for Bryan's work going into it, and the crowd reacted to it as such, and they were happy to see the New Day, all three of them, with the titles. And so can't give enough credit to Bryan, still the best heel in pro wrestling today. Paul Heyman, this is funny looking back on, Paul Heyman came out and he promised us once again that Brock would cash in, and then he just kind of left it with, but maybe he's not. So, maybe he's not. We had Ricochet versus AJ Styles for the United States title. this was a surprising one. Gallows and Anderson take out Ricochet before the match, and just for a brief moment before feeding him back and letting the match start. And so the story of the match was the outside distractions from Gallows and Anderson. I was half expecting Finn Balor to come out and join his club brothers and turn heel. That did not happen. I wouldn't mind if they did do that at some point and just put the whole thing together, because it's not like Balor's doing much of anything else. So yeah, the story was that Ricochet would continue to get distracted by Gallows and Anderson. Eventually, he would take out Anderson, I think, and he was going for a 630 on AJ, I believe. But the ref is distracted by Anderson getting on the apron. And so, from the other side, Gallows pushes or pulls Ricochet and crotches him on the top rope. AJ Styles comes up and gives him a Styles Clash from the top rope, and Styles wins the United States title. And I didn't really expect it. I picked Ricochet. I knew there was. I felt conflicted on this one because it felt like both of them desperately needed a win, but I guess they decided that AJ needed it more. It just, with AJ just turning heel and just forming this faction, they definitely, it was, I can't sit here and say for sure that Ricochet needed the win more than AJ Styles, because AJ's built up enough credibility over time, but when someone just turns, I can see that they want to keep AJ strong and keep that unit strong. And had their first title match just ended with AJ losing, then I can see the reason that they didn't want to do that. But at the same time, Ricochet just winning the United States title from Joe at the last pay-per-view, and it being such a good moment for Ricochet to finally be able to build some traction, it's unfortunate that it was ended so soon. But heel AJ and the club, we've seen in the past, is a great act together. And you can go back to the stuff they did with John Cena and everything they did in the brief time that they were together, the stuff with Roman Reigns, and it was all good stuff. And so, I mean, hopefully I don't know if it'll be like they'll build to Ricochet reclaiming the United States title and overcoming the odds. If they do, then that'll be a cool redemption story for Ricochet. Maybe Ricochet finds some backup to even up the Gallows and Anderson outside, and maybe they have Ricochet reclaim the United States title at some point. But either way, I'm sure there'll be a rematch. Probably at SummerSlam. I would think that they'll at least hold off until then. But interesting decision. I can't say I 100% agree with taking the title off Ricochet so soon, but I understand the reasoning behind it. Preferably, I would have rather just not had them book themselves into a corner like this where they had to make a decision like this. So, I mean, it might have been better if you leave this one off, you save this until SummerSlam, and have AJ get the win there, and at least get Ricochet a little more momentum before then. Another match that was added to the card was Dolph Ziggler versus Kevin Owens. They came out, the bell rang, there was a Stone Cold Stunner from Owens, and there was a pin, and that was it. Owens beats Ziggler in 15 seconds, and he then cuts a promo after, tells Shane to kiss his ass again, saying that he speaks for everyone watching and everyone in the back. So, we'll see where they go with Owens and Shane. We had Samoa Joe versus Kofi Kingston. Samoa Joe, the perennial loser. This now marks the 8th time that Samoa Joe has had a chance to win a WWE World title and has failed to do it. And that is a stat that rings true, as Samoa Joe has ultimately been Bray Wyatted to death. Even worse than Bray Wyatt. At least Bray Wyatt eventually won the title, even though he only had it for a month. But, it's just the syndrome now that'll be stuck with Joe until they decide to do something about it, is that he'll be the great talker. He'll be threatening. He'll sound threatening. He'll sound convincing. But then when the time to win or lose comes, he will lose. And this marks the 8th time, and Joe is still not became a world champion. This was I didn't really care for this match. I thought it was pretty boring, and I think it's a shame for Kofi that there hasn't been a good enough challenger to really bring out the best of this reign. It's really slowed him down. The matches with Ziggler and now with Joe, it's halted any momentum he had coming out of WrestleMania, which is a shame. But we'll see. Maybe they'll get him a big opponent going into SummerSlam, and they can re-kickstart the Kofi momentum. We have the winners take all mixed tag Extreme Rules main event. So it's a mixed tag Extreme Rules match. Figure that one out. It's Becky Lynch and Seth Rollins against Lacey Evans and Baron Corbin. Ignoring most of the beginning stuff, the big spot of the match was Rollins and Lynch putting Corbin and Lacey through 2 tables they had set up outside the ring. Becky puts Lacey through one with a leg drop off the top rope, and then Seth Rollins leaped over them and onto Corbin with the frog splash. Later in the match, Corbin would end up hitting an end of days on Becky Lynch. As Becky was distracted, she just threw Lacey to the outside. Corbin comes in, hits her with an end of days, as Seth Rollins is seeing this laid out in the corner, and this sparks a insane Seth Rollins to clobber Corbin with chair shots and kendo stick shots, and he would then hit Corbin with not 1, not 2, but 3 stomps. And during all this, Lacey was so mortified that she would not even attempt to help Corbin, and she just backed up the ramp and decided that it just wasn't her night. So Rollins hits the 3 stomps, he gets the pin, and Becky and Seth retain, as Becky wasn't able to enjoy it because she was laid out on the outside from the end of days by Corbin. And in the perfect timing, as Seth is concerned for Becky, Lesnar's music hits. Brock Lesnar runs down, Heyman hands in the briefcase, and there's always like this thought of, at least for me, like when someone runs down with the briefcase, like, okay, is the bell gonna ring? Is the bell gonna ring? Is the bell actually gonna ring? And as soon as the bell rings, you're like, oh shit, here we go. And so the bell indeed does ring. Brock lays out Seth with an F5. He pins Seth Rollins. 1, 2, 3. And Brock Lesnar, for the 3rd time, is the undisputed Universal Heavyweight Champion. And I guess you could say we all knew it was coming at some point with Brock Lesnar holding the briefcase. We all knew it was inevitable. And to try to find silver linings to this, let's just be honest here, man. Seth Rollins' run with this Universal title has been an absolute dud. The stuff with him and Becky on TV is cringy and not a good story. There's no meaning to it. It's just trying to take advantage and just use their real life relationship and put it on WWE TV to make it seem like it's something interesting, but it's just not. And since Rollins won the title from Lesnar at WrestleMania, I mean, what has he done? I can hardly remember half of the stuff that Rollins has done since then. It was inevitable that this was going to happen. It was just a matter of, would it be Seth or Kofi? And this is finding silver linings, because I'm not going to support Brock being Universal Champion or Brock being any world champion at this point. But if we're looking for silver linings, would you have rather had Brock be the Universal Champion or the WWE Champion? Because to me, Seth's championship run in this WrestleMania to now period, I mean, it's both of them have been very lackluster, but I would still pick Rollins to be the one to get cashed in on. And that's just how I feel about it. Like, I like Rollins. I think he's one of the best wrestlers on the planet right now, as far as just in-ring ability. But there's nothing interesting about him being champion. And that's not his fault. It's just that there's no good stories or storylines or feuds or anything that have come from Rollins being champion. I mean, the biggest feud Rollins has had is against the internet and against Jon Moxley. And that's not going to help him in WWE continuity. And that's about it. Like, that's how I feel. Just getting into Lesnar actually being Universal Champion. SummerSlam's coming up. He'll at least have a match there. Maybe we'll see Lesnar drop the title there, but I doubt they would put the title on Lesnar to just not have him hold it for a while. It's you just got to look towards what the payoff could be for Lesnar. I can't imagine that the payoff is just going to be him dropping it back to Rollins. The other conventional, the old faithful, would be dropping it to Roman Reigns, but been there, done that. So let's just think, who besides Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns could possibly, logistically, as far as would WWE actually do it, beat Brock Lesnar for the Universal Championship? And I have come with a feasible solution. And do I expect this to happen? No. But if it did, then I would not only approve of WWE putting the title on Brock Lesnar at this point, I would applaud them for thinking this far in advance to have Lesnar win the Money in the Bank and win the title in order to do this. And that would be simple. Bray Wyatt. You have one match, Lesnar versus Bray Wyatt, The Fiend, at SummerSlam. And similar to the way that Brock Lesnar destroyed and dismantled John Cena upon returning, you have Bray Wyatt destroy and dismantle Brock Lesnar. You have to debut Bray Wyatt with a bang. You have to debut Wyatt immediately establishing him as a top star. And how else could you possibly do that than by having Bray Wyatt dismantle, destroy, and humiliate the only star that WWE has on their roster right now? Or at the very least, the biggest star as far as drawing power, as far as polarizing popularity, as far as mainstream, as far as anything that you want to look at, ticket sales, whatever else. The biggest star that this company has is Brock Lesnar. And the ultimate way to use Brock Lesnar is to take his star power and use it to rub off against someone else and turn them into a star. And you can do that simply by having Bray Wyatt debut one match versus Brock Lesnar. Bray Wyatt defeats Brock Lesnar and becomes the Universal Champion and is now the unstoppable force among Monday Night Raw. And you can even go back to 2016. There was at least a tease for a Brock Lesnar versus Bray Wyatt program. It never happened. To my knowledge, this is still a Bray Wyatt versus Brock Lesnar is a match that has not happened. And for it to be Bray Wyatt's first match under this new gimmick to debut in such a manner that he obliterates Brock Lesnar and establishes himself as the new top dog, I cannot think of a better possible way to debut him. And that will do it for this Extreme Rules review. We'll see if my wild, I don't want to say prediction, but my fantasy booking of this could possibly come true. Let me know what you guys think, though. If you think that's a good idea, if you would appreciate Brock Lesnar being champion, if that's what ended up happening, leave a comment and just sound off there. Subscribe, do all that cool YouTube stuff. Check out the full podcast we do on Spreaker, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, all those places. The Enhancement Talent Podcast links are always in the description. But until then, later.